The most dangerous weapon you own is not in your hand, it's in your mouth. Your tongue can destroy in seconds what your mind took years to build. Every word you speak is either building your future or burning it down. Your brain is the command center of your entire being. It is the master architect of your reality, the origin of every decision, and the place where your future is silently being constructed long before a single word leaves your mouth. Yet, for many, the tongue becomes faster than the brain. Words are launched before the mind has even weighed their consequences. This is where the balance of power must shift. Your brain must be stronger than your tongue, because words spoken without mental alignment can destroy trust, damage relationships, and set into motion events you later regret. Every word you speak is a result of a thought, but not every thought should be spoken. The gap between what the mind creates and what the mouth delivers is where self-mastery lies. The impulse to speak is not inherently wrong. It is part of being human. But the uncontrolled impulse to speak without filtering, without reflection, without aligning to a greater intention, is where most people sabotage themselves. When your mind is in control, your words become deliberate. When your tongue is in control, your words become reckless. The power of thought over impulse begins with awareness. Most people do not even notice the microsecond that exists between stimulus and response. Someone says something that triggers you, and almost automatically your tongue moves faster than your awareness. But in truth, there is always a fraction of a moment, a breath, a pause, where your brain has the chance to intervene. That fraction of a second is where strength is built. When you choose to hold back, to pause, to let your brain process, you are not being passive, you are being powerful. You are training your mind to lead and your tongue to follow. Your tongue can only say what your mind permits, but here is the challenge. If your mind is undisciplined, impulsive, and reactive, then it will permit the tongue to say almost anything in the heat of the moment. This is why the real work is not in controlling the mouth. It is in fortifying the mind. You do not need to constantly bite your tongue. You need to strengthen the neural circuits in your brain that control your responses. This is mental fitness, and like physical fitness, it comes with repetition. Every time you override the urge to react impulsively, you are wiring your brain for greater control. Science shows that the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision making, self-control, and rational thinking, can grow stronger with consistent practice, but it only takes the lead when you are conscious enough to engage it. The more you practice pausing before you speak, the more automatic it becomes for the brain to lead and the tongue to follow. You are, quite literally, reshaping your brain when you prioritize thought over impulse. Impulsive speech is often emotional speech, and emotional speech tends to come from deeper, older brain systems, primitive survival responses that evolved to react quickly. When we are in a heightened emotional state, the brain's limbic system can hijack the conversation before the prefrontal cortex has had a chance to intervene. This is why so many people say things they don't truly mean in moments of anger, frustration, or stress. They are not speaking from their higher mind. They are speaking from an emotional reflex. By developing the habit of thought over impulse, you are reclaiming your power from those primitive patterns and choosing to operate from your higher intelligence. Consider how much of your life could change if you consistently spoke from a place of intention rather than reaction. Relationships would deepen because your words would build trust instead of eroding it. Opportunities would expand because people would see you as someone who brings clarity and value to conversations rather than chaos and drama. Your self-respect would grow because you would no longer feel the sting of regret over something you said too quickly. This is not about suppressing your voice. It is about refining it. It is about ensuring that when you speak, Your words align with your vision, your values, and your desired future. Impulse feels good in the moment. There is a rush in saying exactly what is on your mind without filtering it, but that rush is short-lived and the cost can be long-lasting. A strong brain understands that the short-term satisfaction of impulsive speech is never worth the long-term damage it can cause. This is why discipline is freedom, because by disciplining your speech, you free yourself from the chains of unnecessary conflict, misunderstanding, and regret. You begin this training in the smallest of moments. It might be resisting the urge to correct someone mid-sentence. It might be pausing before responding to a critical comment. It might be choosing to say nothing in a situation where your silence speaks more powerfully than any words could. Each time you choose thought over impulse, you are proving to yourself that you are not a prisoner of your emotions or your habits. You are a conscious creator of your communication. The power of thought over impulse is not just a communication skill, it is a life skill. It is the ability to live from the inside out rather than the outside in. It is the mastery of internal alignment before external expression. It is knowing that your words are a tool of creation and treating them with the respect they deserve. When your brain is stronger than your tongue, your words become an asset, not a liability. They carry weight, not just noise. They build, they inspire, they guide, they heal, and it all begins with the simple, profound choice to think before you speak. Self-control is not simply about willpower or discipline in the traditional sense. It is a measurable, trainable function of the brain. Deep within your skull lies the structure responsible for decision, making, planning, and regulating impulses, the prefrontal cortex. This part of your brain acts as the executive, the one who weighs consequences, filters distractions, and decides what you will or will not do, or in this case, what you will or will not say. When your brain is strong enough to override your tongue, it is because your prefrontal cortex has been trained to lead rather than follow. Most people assume that self-control is a matter of character, something fixed by personality. But neuroscience shows that self-control is a neurobiological process. Every time you choose to resist an urge, you activate and strengthen the neural pathways associated with restraint. These neural pathways are like muscles. The more you use them, the stronger they get. Each moment you choose to think before speaking is a repetition, a kind of mental weightlifting that builds your capacity to pause, evaluate, and respond deliberately rather than react impulsively. In moments of emotional intensity, the brain's older and more primitive structures, the amygdala and the limbic system, become highly active. These systems evolved for survival to help our ancestors react instantly to danger. The problem is that in modern life, the dangers we encounter are rarely life-threatening. They are more often psychological or emotional. A harsh word, a perceived insult, a disagreement, these trigger the same neural alarm bells that once signaled physical threats. When this happens, your brain floods with stress chemicals like adrenaline and cortisol, priming you for a fast, reactive response. If your prefrontal cortex is underdeveloped or disengaged in that moment, your tongue will take the lead and say things that serve the emotional impulse rather than the long-term outcome. Training your brain for self-control is about strengthening the bridge between the prefrontal cortex and the emotional brain. This bridge allows you to notice the rise of emotion without being overtaken by it. It gives you just enough space between the stimulus and your response to consider, is what I am about to say aligned with my higher self? Will it move me closer to my goals or further away? The stronger that bridge becomes, the more automatic it is to choose thoughtful words over impulsive reactions. Neuroscience has revealed that the brain is plastic. It can change structurally and functionally throughout life. This means that no matter how impulsive you may have been in the past, you can rewire your brain to become more deliberate in your speech. One of the most powerful ways to do this is through mindfulness. When you practice observing your thoughts without acting on them, you are essentially giving your prefrontal cortex more opportunities to engage. Each time you catch yourself about to speak and choose to pause instead, you are laying down new neural wiring that makes restraint easier in the future. Self-control is not about suppression. It is about redirection. Suppressing your words without addressing the underlying impulse can create tension and frustration. True self-control comes from understanding the emotion behind the impulse and deciding how to channel it constructively. This is where the brain's ability to reframe situations becomes critical. By changing how you perceive a trigger, you change the emotional charge associated with it, and in doing so, you make it easier to control the urge to speak from a reactive state. Repeatedly practicing self-control in speech has far-reaching effects beyond communication. Studies show that individuals with higher self-control tend to have better mental health, stronger relationships, and greater success in achieving long-term goals. This is because the same neural circuits that govern what you say also govern what you do. By mastering control over your words, you are reinforcing the mental pathways that help you control your actions, your habits, and even your emotional responses. Think of each conversation as an opportunity to train your brain. Every trigger is a mental gym, every temptation to react a chance to strengthen your prefrontal cortex. Over time, this repeated engagement of self-control reshapes your brain's default mode. Instead of letting the tongue rush ahead at the speed of emotion, your brain develops a natural tendency to slow down the process, to filter, to consider. This doesn't mean you will speak less. It means you will speak with more impact, more accuracy, and more alignment with your intentions. The neuroscience of self-control also teaches that the brain works on an energy budget. Self-control requires mental energy, and when that energy is depleted, it becomes harder to resist impulses. This is why stress, fatigue, and overstimulation often lead to regrettable words. The more your brain is trained to exercise self-control, the less energy it takes to do so. Just like an athlete becomes more efficient with practice, your mental endurance for restraint increases. You conserve mental energy because self-control becomes the default rather than the struggle. In the beginning, developing this skill will feel uncomfortable. You may catch yourself mid-sentence, realizing you were about to say something unnecessary or harmful. That discomfort is a sign of progress. It means your brain is becoming more aware of the gap between thought and speech. As that awareness grows, so does your ability to make different choices in that gap. You begin to see that every unspoken word is not a loss, but a victory for the brain over the tongue, for the higher self over the momentary impulse, for the long-term vision over the short-term release. Every word you speak carries energy, a vibration that extends beyond the sound of your voice. Words are not empty noise. They are packets of intention that ripple through the environment, influencing not only the people who hear them, but also your own state of being. In the same way a stone dropped into water creates expanding circles that move outward, every word you release sends waves into the world. The question is whether those waves build or destroy, uplift or diminish, heal or harm. When your brain is strong enough to lead your tongue, you begin to understand that your words are not merely a form of communication. They are a form of creation. Modern science and ancient wisdom both recognize that language is deeply intertwined with energy. On a physiological level, the words you speak shape the chemistry of your body. Positive, empowering words can activate neural pathways associated with calm, confidence, and clarity, While negative or harsh words can trigger stress responses, releasing hormones like cortisol that heighten tension and diminish clear thinking. On a psychological level, words form the framework of thought. They are the architecture of the stories you tell yourself and others. On an energetic level, words are a frequency broadcast, tuning you and those around you into certain emotional states. This is why speaking without conscious awareness can be so damaging. When you allow your tongue to run ahead of your brain, you risk sending out vibrations that are not aligned with your values or your vision. Words spoken in anger carry a chaotic, sharp energy that can linger in a space long after the sound has faded. Words spoken with intention carry a grounded, coherent energy that can inspire, reassure, and transform. The difference between the two lies in the state of the mind that generates them. A reactive mind produces scattered, unstable frequencies. A centered mind produces balanced, resonant frequencies. When you understand that words carry energy, you begin to see them as an extension of your own internal state. If your thoughts are turbulent, your words will carry that turbulence. If your thoughts are calm, your words will reflect that calmness. The energy of your words is not just about the choice of vocabulary. It is about the emotional charge and the intention behind them. A simple phrase like "I understand" can be delivered with genuine empathy or with sarcasm, and the energy in each version is entirely different. Your brain must be strong enough to pause and align the inner state with the outer expression so that the energy you transmit matches the message you truly want to send. Energy is contagious. The emotional frequency behind your words can influence the nervous systems of those who hear you. When you speak with irritation, others often feel defensive or agitated in return. When you speak with sincerity and clarity, others feel safer, more open, and more receptive. This is not accidental. It is a neurological process called emotional contagion, where the brain's mirror neurons pick up on the emotional states of others and begin to replicate them internally. Your words are a vehicle for transmitting that state, which means the stronger your brain's control over your tongue, the more intentional you can be about the energy you spread. Even within your own mind, words have power. The silent language you use to describe your life, your challenges, and your potential shapes your emotional reality. If your internal dialogue is filled with words of doubt, limitation, or criticism, your brain and body will respond as though those statements are truth. If your internal dialogue is filled with encouragement, possibility, and clarity, your brain begins to orient itself toward those realities. This is not about blind optimism. It is about understanding that words are signals, and your brain takes those signals seriously. The energy of words can either close doors or open them. In professional settings, the way you speak can create opportunities or shut them down instantly. In personal relationships, the tone and choice of words can deepen trust or erode it. When you allow your brain to lead, you take ownership of that influence. You recognize that each conversation is an exchange of energy, and you begin to ask yourself before speaking, what energy am I contributing to this moment? That question alone can shift the trajectory of your words, guiding them away from reflexive reaction and toward intentional creation. On a deeper level, words are not just carriers of meaning. They are triggers of memory and association. A single phrase can unlock a flood of emotions, both in you and in others. This is why careless speech can wound so deeply, and why conscious speech can heal so profoundly. You may forget the exact details of a conversation, but you will remember the energy it carried, and so will the people you speak to. This is why strengthening the brain to be the gatekeeper of your words is not optional if you want to live with integrity. It is essential. The energy of words also works in subtle ways over time. The consistent tone and style of your speech shape how others perceive you. If your words often carry tension, sarcasm, or cynicism, people will begin to associate you with those energies, even if you occasionally speak positively. If your words regularly carry calm, clarity, and encouragement, you become known as a person whose presence is uplifting. This is not about creating a false persona. It is about aligning your outward language with the best of who you are, so that your presence naturally radiates that energy. When you speak, you are not just passing along information. You are setting a frequency, planting a seed, shaping an atmosphere. Every conversation is an energetic exchange, and you are either adding coherence or adding noise. Your brain's strength lies in its ability to choose which one you are contributing in any given moment. The energy of your words is never neutral. It is either raising or lowering the vibration of the space you are in. Verbal reactivity is one of the most deeply ingrained habits of the human mind. It is the automatic, unfiltered response that comes rushing out the moment we are triggered, challenged, or emotionally stirred. For many, this habit operates so quickly and unconsciously that it feels almost impossible to stop. The words leap from the tongue before the mind has even considered their weight, their consequence, or their alignment with truth. The habit is not just about speaking too quickly. It is about speaking from a place that bypasses higher reasoning and deeper intention. When this becomes a pattern, it not only disrupts communication, but also erodes self-respect, trust, and the ability to influence others effectively. The tongue often reveals the subconscious mind. It is in moments of heightened emotion that the patterns buried beneath our awareness surface in raw form. A sarcastic comment, a sharp retort, a defensive outburst. These are not born from calm and deliberate thought. They are echoes of old conditioning, past experiences, and emotional patterns that live deep within the subconscious. The challenge is that the subconscious mind does not ask for permission to speak. It operates automatically like a reflex, and when we are not present enough to notice, it can hijack our voice entirely. Breaking the habit of verbal reactivity begins with awareness. You cannot change a pattern you do not see. The first step is to start observing yourself in real time. This means paying attention not only to the words you speak, but also to the physical sensations, emotions, and mental triggers that arise before you speak. Often, you will notice that verbal reactivity is preceded by a tightening in the chest, a quickening of the breath, a surge of heat in the body, or a narrowing of focus. These are the body's signals that the emotional brain is preparing to take control of your tongue. By learning to recognize these signals, you create a small window of opportunity to interrupt the pattern. The next step is to train the brain to pause in that window. This is not about silencing yourself indefinitely. It is about reclaiming the space between stimulus and response. In neuroscience, this space is where the prefrontal cortex has the chance to step in and make a conscious choice. Without that pause, the older, reactive parts of the brain dominate, and your words come out as a reflection of emotion rather than intention. Over time, the act of pausing rewires your brain. It strengthens the neural pathways for self-control and weakens the automatic loops of reactivity. It is important to understand that verbal reactivity is not just about what you say in moments of anger or conflict. It can also show up in more subtle ways. Interrupting others mid-sentence, speaking over people to assert your point, rushing to respond without fully listening, these are all forms of reactivity. They stem from the same root, the inability to slow down the internal process enough to let thought lead speech. This is why breaking the habit requires more than just managing heated moments. It requires cultivating a new default mode of communication where listening, processing, and then speaking becomes the norm. One of the most powerful ways to dismantle verbal reactivity is to work on the internal dialogue. The way you speak to yourself when you are alone is a direct influence on the way you speak to others in the heat of the moment. If your internal language is filled with judgment, criticism, or defensiveness, that tone will naturally spill into your external language when triggered. By shifting your self-talk to be more balanced, compassionate, and intentional, you create a mental environment where reactivity has less fuel to draw from. Breaking this habit also requires emotional honesty. Many people believe they are simply telling it like it is when they react sharply, but often verbal reactivity is a mask for deeper emotions: fear, insecurity, frustration, or the need to feel in control. When you learn to identify and name these underlying emotions without rushing to express them through reactive speech, you take away their control over your voice. Naming an emotion like "I feel frustrated" internally allows you to process it without letting it dictate the tone and content of your words. The more you work to weaken the grip of reactivity, the more you notice its absence. Conversations become less about defending yourself and more about understanding others. Disagreements lose their sharp edges because you are no longer feeding them with impulsive language. Instead of being pulled into verbal battles, you begin to guide interactions towards solutions and clarity. This shift is not only noticed by you, it is felt by everyone you communicate with. People respond differently when they sense that you are not easily provoked, that you will not throw words carelessly into the space between you. Breaking the habit of verbal reactivity is also an act of self-respect. Each time you choose to hold back a reactive comment, you are telling yourself that your peace, your integrity, and your long-term outcomes matter more than the fleeting satisfaction of getting your point across. In the moment, this self-respect becomes a stabilizing force, making it easier to remain grounded even when others are not. You no longer match the energy of chaos with more chaos. You choose the higher road, guided by a brain that has learned to lead the tongue rather than follow it. Over time, as this habit dissolves, communication transforms from a battlefield into a creative space. Words become tools of connection rather than weapons of defense. Your brain, strengthened by repeated acts of conscious choice, becomes the filter that ensures your tongue speaks only in ways that serve clarity, truth, and alignment. The reactive loops that once felt unbreakable begin to fade, replaced by a steady, intentional rhythm of thought and speech that reflects the best version of who you are. Speaking from a higher mind means allowing the most evolved, conscious, and intentional part of yourself to guide your words. It is the practice of ensuring that every sentence you speak passes through the filter of wisdom, empathy, and clarity before it reaches the outside world. In this state, your communication is no longer driven by impulses, emotions, or the need to be right. It is guided by the vision of who you want to be and the impact you want to have. When your brain is stronger than your tongue, the voice that comes through is not the raw, unprocessed reaction of the moment, but the considered expression of your highest self. The higher mind is not a mystical or abstract idea. It is a real function of your brain, largely centered in the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for long-term thinking, moral reasoning, and self-regulation. This part of your mind is capable of holding multiple perspectives, weighing consequences, and choosing words that align with a bigger picture rather than a fleeting emotion. When you speak from this place, you are not simply exchanging information. You are intentionally shaping the emotional and intellectual space between you and others. The challenge is that the higher mind does not automatically take the lead in conversation. In moments of stress, conflict, or excitement, the brain's more primitive emotional systems can easily take over, driving speech that is reactive and short-sighted. Speaking from the higher mind requires conscious engagement. It means slowing down enough to allow that part of your brain to come online before your tongue moves. It is the difference between reacting and responding, between letting words escape unchecked and letting them emerge as deliberate choices. When you speak from the higher mind, your words carry an entirely different energy. They are not only more thoughtful, they are more impactful. People feel the difference when they are in the presence of someone whose communication is rooted in presence and purpose. Such words have a way of diffusing tension rather than escalating it, inspiring cooperation rather than resistance, and opening dialogue rather than shutting it down. This is because the higher mind is naturally attuned to empathy. It seeks understanding before judgment, connection before correction, and clarity before conclusion. Speaking from a higher mind also involves aligning your words with your values. It requires asking yourself, is what I'm about to say reflective of who I want to be? This self-check turns every interaction into an opportunity to reinforce your integrity. It keeps you from making statements that may win a momentary argument but lose long-term respect. It reminds you that every word contributes to the story people tell themselves about who you are, and that story is shaped over time by the consistency of your speech. This kind of communication demands both discipline and compassion. Discipline is needed to hold back the urge to speak prematurely, to allow thought to mature before it is given voice. Compassion is needed to ensure that your words are not only true, but also delivered in a way that others can receive. The higher mind understands that truth without kindness can be as destructive as a lie, and that kindness without truth can enable stagnation or misunderstanding. It is the integration of both that gives your words their greatest power. Speaking from the higher mind also means resisting the pull of ego. The ego often wants to speak to defend, to dominate, or to prove a point. The higher mind wants to speak to illuminate, to collaborate, and to bring clarity. This requires humility, the willingness to listen deeply, to consider that you may not have the full picture, and to speak in ways that invite more understanding rather than shutting it down. It is the ability to remain steady when provoked, to choose words that keep the conversation moving forward rather than spiraling into conflict. The process of developing this ability is ongoing. At first, it may feel unnatural to slow down and reflect before speaking, especially in fast-paced or emotionally charged situations. You may notice moments where you recognize what the higher mind would say, but feel the pull of a quicker, sharper response. Over time, with practice, the gap between recognition and action begins to close. Speaking from the higher mind becomes more instinctive because the neural pathways associated with patience, empathy, and deliberate thinking grow stronger. The very act of choosing higher-minded speech rewires your brain to make that choice more easily in the future. Another key element of this practice is intentional silence. The higher mind knows that not every thought needs to be spoken, not every question needs an immediate answer, and not every conflict requires verbal engagement. Silence, when used intentionally, can be one of the most powerful forms of communication. It can give space for reflection, signal deep listening, and prevent words from being wasted on reactions that do not serve the moment. Choosing not to speak until your words are fully aligned with your higher mind is not a sign of passivity, it is a sign of strength. This shift to speaking from the higher mind changes not only the way others experience you, but also the way you experience yourself. You begin to feel more grounded, more in control, and more aligned with your own values. You stop feeling the regret that comes from saying something you didn't truly mean or that didn't represent your best self. Instead, you develop the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your words carry intention, precision, and resonance. You become someone whose speech others listen to not because you speak the loudest, but because you speak with clarity, purpose, and wisdom. Your words are not separate from your mind. They are its extension, its echo, its signature in the world. When your brain is stronger than your tongue, you move from being a reactor to being a creator. You begin to recognize that every conversation is a moment of influence, every statement is a seed, and every silence is a choice. Strengthening the mind to lead the tongue is not a one-time act. It is a daily practice, a conscious discipline, and a lifelong refinement. It is the awareness to pause before you speak, the wisdom to choose intention over impulse, and the humility to let your higher mind guide the energy you release into the world. When you live this way, your words stop being weapons of reaction and become instruments of creation. You speak with clarity instead of chaos, with purpose instead of pride, with presence instead of provocation. And in doing so, you not only elevate your communication, you elevate your life, the lives of those around you, and the quality of the reality you are helping to shape.